So this webinar is helping employees manage reentry. As businesses reopen and employees return to the workplace, tips for helping everyone get back in the game. So today, Deborah Jordan is joining us again. We were lucky enough to have her a week or so ago, and she works at Centerstone. She is the Client Access Manager with Centerstone and has a variety of trainings and endorsements that include infant mental health and trauma, specific trainings for all ages. She's licensed in the state of Florida and endorsed with infant mental health in both Tennessee and Florida. She's a military mother of 2 soldiers, as well as a military spouse of 26 years. The majority of her experience revolves around crisis and trauma. So with that, I will turn it over to Deborah. Thank you for being here.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that I'm able to cover any areas of concerns that you have. And like Amy said before, please feel free to ask those questions. I love questions. It helps me know that you were engaged and that I was able to assist in some way. This presentation is on returning to normal, whatever that may be for you or however you may define it. And it also includes the new normal, which is a buzz catchphrase that's been going around, but we want to make sure that we make it defined for us. If we can get started on the first slide. Before we even start, we need to consider these facts. These came from Forbes magazine and its collection of important information. Only 12% of employees in the United States actually leave a company for more money. We tend to convince ourselves that that's why they go, but the truth is they want other things, not just money. Being happy in your position is extremely important, and Americans realize that. The second thing to remember is a Harvard Business Review says that 58% of people say that they trust a stranger over their own boss. That is very, very scary. We need to work with our boss. We need to trust our boss. So it's important that we make sure we're the kind of boss or the kind of supervisor or manager that our employees can trust, and not just being that person, but being able to teach our staff that we are that person. 79% of people who quit their job say it's because they're not appreciated. That's a big thing. They may be appreciated, but they don't know they're appreciated. 53% of Americans are unhappy at their work, and recognition is the one thing that employees say that could have been done more, that could have been given to them, that would have made them be happier at work. So let's keep these things in mind as we're moving forward, because we want to make sure that we are not the boss or the supervisor that falls into these categories. Okay, we ready for our next slide? We want to have a plan. And our plan has to consider everything, all the things that were just mentioned, but it also wants to consider what is normal. What was normal? Was it working? Was it not working? And when we ask ourselves that, we really have to say, what does working mean? Are we getting productivity out of our staff, but they're not happy? Is that working? We need to consider that. The other thing is, what is our new normal right now? What is working right now? Are we having happier staff, or are we constantly hearing staff complain about being lonely or bored or feeling like you're not there for them or feeling like they're isolated? Or for some staff, has their productivity gone way down? When we look at this, we really need to be looking at it individually. Some people are thriving at home. Some people are not. We also want to consider, how can I make the best of the old normal and the new normal, merge it together to get what I want in the future? Is that possible? For some staff, does it mean staying at home is a better option? For some staff, does it mean getting them out of the house quickly is the best option? And then for some staff, does that mean slow integration? The next thing is, should I reconsider my definition of working? I kind of touched on that earlier. Working is not always being productive, because it's working for you but not them. And there's things that will cost you in the long run: the cost of hiring new employees, the cost of going a long period of time without someone in that position. There's a lot of cost if we don't have an accurate definition of working. Are there government regulations that we need to consider when returning to work? And will your staff be able to follow those regulations? we don't know if at some point we're going to have the vaccine to be able to work in certain settings. We don't know if wearing masks is going to continue to be required. Do we have staff that have asthma that can't wear the mask? Do we have staff that are immunocompromised and returning isn't as much an option? We need to weigh all these things in when we're creating a new plan. And now more than ever, it's very important that we're individualistic, that it's not going to be one size fits all. It's just not, unless you have all staff that are exactly the same. And if you have that, then your business is going to suffer because everybody thinking alike is not going to bring diversity. So we need to consider all those things. And next slide, please. When we're getting started, we have all these things to consider. We're going to investigate the old normal. We really need to know, where could we have had improvement? Those are things you may not have even acknowledged or seen or noticed or known about until now, because it just always was. We do it this way because we've always done it this way. The people before me did it this way, and that's the way it's supposed to be done. Or this company does it that way. And now we're going, hey, since things have changed, I don't even like the way it was, or I don't like that area, or staff are really happy that we're doing this now. So let's investigate what was working. Did you have a high rate of PTO or call-offs prior to as compared to now? Is it lower now? At the end of a workday, does a client have, or a staff member have more things completed than they did before? What was working in the old model? We need to try to bring that back in and continue with it. This is a great opportunity to rule out what wasn't working. How connected was your staff with one another prior to? Did they go into cubicles and not talk to one another? Did the only time they see each other was in a meeting? Were they in boring Zoom meetings already that they just weren't happy with? How many times did you hear the phrase, that could have been an email? I mean, we've all heard it and may have even said it. So if going to these meetings wasn't working before, then we don't want to carry it through. We don't want to start it back up. We don't want to continue or restart old processes that just weren't working. So keep those in mind. If our staff was already isolated, even though they were in an office, we don't want to go back to that. If we're going to do that, then might as well be safe at home. I hope that makes sense for everybody. And then also, before, what was your rate of loss of employees? Was it high? Because that cost of retraining new staff is motivation for you to change. Change is hard, but that is motivation, because retraining staff, having those long gaps with no staff in a position, those things really cost, and we need to make sure that the things that we're doing is going to minimize that. How productive was your staff before? I mentioned that, versus how productive they are now. Being individualistic at this point is extremely important. We need to make sure that we're trying to, one, at least acknowledge the needs of everyone as an individual and recognize them. But if we can meet those needs, now's the time to do it. And most certainly now's the time to allow our staff to know that we care individually. All right. After investigating the old normal, let's look at what we're doing now. Or I'm sorry, let's go. We're still in old normal. We looked at what was staff working. Now's the time. You've investigated it. Now is the time to ask the staff. We need their buy-in. Do they agree with you? What do they think was working? And why do they think it was better prior to this COVID experience? We want to be very careful not to mislead our staff. We're asking these questions because what they have to say is very important, but we're not asking these questions because they have the ability to make all the new decisions. So we want to have them to have buy-in. And the way to get to that is to just say, hey, today in this meeting, I really want to know from you guys what was working. As we move forward, we want to know how you felt about the process before and how the process is now. And if they don't feel comfortable saying it in person or in the meeting, let them write it to you. Let them send it an email after the meeting. And the next time you meet with them, and I'll bring this up a little later, you're going to repeat back to them some of the things they said, even if it's ludicrous. I mean, if it doesn't fit, if it's not going to work, it's not going to promote change or anything like that, we're still going to repeat back to them their own verbiage, because that lets them know, hey, I heard you. So we want to touch on these subjects: connectedness or morale, PTO or absentees, and productivity. Those are three main things that we want to make sure that our staffer know that we're looking at. It tells them we care, it tells them we're watching, and it tells them what's important. So when you ask for their opinion and try to get their buy-in, those three main areas we need to cover. If something was working, we're going to consider a slow return to it. Ask your staff, hey, how can we get back to that without jerking someone from they were in the office, back home, and then back to the office? How can we have a slow return? You may get some really good feedback on that. And there may be some areas of concern that you've never considered. If something was not working, let's consider the new normal. What is working now? Should we make those changes permanent? And make sure, again, that the staff doesn't think that they are making these decisions for you, that they understand they're collaboratively offering their mindset. Also consider the hybrid between the old and new as you're creating a future normal. And like I said, always consult with your staff because they appreciate that buy-in. Now let's look at the new normal. Again, listen to your staff within reason. Some staff may ask for things that are absolutely not doable for your company, and only you know that. You know it's not going to be doable. However, you also know your staff. So when you're preparing to have these conversations, you may start the conversation off with, I know that some of you guys, and I'm going to just give an example. I know that some of you guys would like to go to work just 3 days a week and have the 4-day weekends. That's usually something that gets mentioned a lot. So without doing that, because our company can't afford that, what other options do you guys think that we could have moving forward? So see, you've already addressed that. You know it's coming. You've heard people mention and grumble about it before. You address it right off the front and say, you know, that's not doable, but where can we go from here? Make sure when you do these things, you're doing it blanket. This is the only time you don't want to individualize. You wouldn't want to say, hey, Pete, you always bring up some ridiculous stuff, so without looking at that, we're going to move forward. We don't want to single anyone out like that, unless it's a good thing. If it's a good thing, we'll single them out. we'll give some public praise. But go ahead and address the things that you know are typically asked for that are not doable for your company, and then move forward with getting their buy-in. What challenges do they have in their current situation? We have to ask staff this. There are challenges I never would have thought of, ever. Things that have come up that have opened my eyes is, you know, hey, I've got a dog with seizures, and loud noises set off his seizures. And every time I get on Zoom, and, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but some people have the certain pitch on their Zoom speaker, and it can give you a headache, you know, things like that. Who would have ever thought a dog having a seizure would have to be put in another room? You've got partners that are working together. They're both working in the house. Even my personal situation, my husband got the office, I got the kitchen. Guess how much weight I can gain working from home? So these are challenges that we may not have considered before, that our staff will make us aware of if we give them that opportunity. That opportunity, like I said before, may have to be in private, or it could be in public. It just depends. But make sure they know you're available to listen, even if they don't want to share in that moment. Another issue that we really need to consider is we have had a normal, they have a new normal. They've adjusted to this new normal. And as we're transitioning to the best needs of your company, we can't jerk them from one thing to the other. It's going to be very hard on families. Husbands and wives are going to make decisions, or partners are going to make decisions. And in reality, whoever is making the most money, that's where the resources are going to go. So if during this COVID issue, we've gotten down to one car and there was no need to fix it because who's driving anyway, and both spouses are returning to work, guess who's going to get the car? The one that's making the most money. So we need to keep that stuff in mind. Resources are being shared right now. And you may not be the priority when push comes to shove, if hard decisions are made. So be flexible and be open. There's areas that we don't know about in each one of our clients' lives. Cars may not be it. It may be kids. You know, someone has to stay home with the kids. The partner may have more pressure to return to work faster than your staff. So you're not just looking at the concerns of your staff. You're looking at the concerns of that staff's whole family. What solutions are they going to have to make in those following areas? Absences, productivity, connectedness, and morale. Again, where do they see? Is that working now? Do they feel totally isolated, or do they feel more, some things you might have done with your business, do they feel more connected now than ever? It's possible. That buy-in from your staff is going to go so much further than you may expect, because if you're using their language, you're using maybe a fraction of their ideas, they're going to believe it's their plan, and they're going to work with you, and it's going to be a smoother transition. Okay. The hybrid future normal. It's kind of weird. That's a phrase I never thought I would say in my life, and now we're saying it. When we're looking at it, this is an opportunity, and it's important you see it that way, because your staff is going to feed off of you. If you see this entire thing as a hassle, a burden, a problem, an issue, just trouble, your staff is going to see the same thing. And they're going to model to their family and their peers what you're modeling to them. So let's look at it as opportunity. Let's be a cheerleader on this. Let's be optimistic, because we need to spread it. It needs to be the only infection we're trying to spread, right? And so we need to decide what was doable and what's not doable. Don't make any promises to your staff. Identify a good timeline. Now is the time to consider hurricane season. When you're looking at this timeline, we don't want to do things too quickly, because we may have to revert some of the things we're doing. And we want to let our staff know that too. Hey, we're going to give this a try. And if that doesn't work, we're going back to this, and have that flexibility and that honesty with your staff that this is the first time we're dealing with this, and we need you to be fluid. We need you to be like water. Okay, you're going to go with the flow. Keeping hurricane season in mind, now we know, one of the pros, I'm looking at this glass half full, now we know we're capable of working from home. If your staff has equipment at home, what do you want them to do in the event of a hurricane with that? How do you want them to protect that equipment? Are you going to require them to bring it to the facility and turn it in if there's any kind of evacuation or anything of that nature? Make sure that your company has a good plan in mind, and that plan is definitely set up to protect your staff. And let them know that too. Hey guys, we've made a decision that if there was a hurricane, for your safety, we're not going to require X, Y, Z, whatever it is. I like with staff to make sure I'm telling them things that I usually assume they know, because assumptions aren't very good in this area. I will say, for your safety, for your morale, for your team building, for your health, I make sure I throw those out there, because then the staff has what we've talked about in the very beginning. They know I appreciate them. They know I want their best, and they know I'm after their well-being. And so when you're saying, as we move forward, for your family's sake, for your needs, what can we do? Like I said, use their verbiage. And if they have buy-in into your plan, if they even have a tiny fraction of buy-in into your plan, you're going to get less resistance. Resistance is very difficult. It brings out the ugly in us when we have resistant staff. And especially if they're resistant in meetings and everybody can see the resistance, and we don't want that to spread. So make sure you're using their language. Pick out the one staff that usually gives you the most resistance, and that's the one you're going to use. You're going to say their example or their verbiage, and you're going to say, hey, I really like what Tom is saying here. How can we take what Tom is saying and use some of it that are in those guidelines I've already set out? So now Tom doesn't feel like he has to resist you. He feels like he's part of your plan, and you're working together collaboratively. Train your staff. It's very important that you know what those CDC safety guidelines are for your business. And you have to make sure that you provide the supplies that these staff will need. You have to make sure, are you going to be, depending on your business, you're going to be required to scan or screen clients before they come in the door, or customers. Are you going to be required to provide hand washing and things of that nature before they're allowed in the door? You really need to know this. Depending on your business, CDC is going to have some guidelines. How many people are allowed in? What's your plan for more people coming in than you originally have room for? Are you going to have them wait in their car? Are you going to again, hurricane season, you know, sunny Florida rains every day. So you've got to have a plan for that. Do you have an awning outside? Are they going to wait in their car? Things of that nature. We really don't want to put clients or staff in danger. We don't want them to, there are things that sometimes we have to ask them to do that can be dangerous. For example, we do drug screening here, and I don't like my staff that close to members of the community. However, we have to do it. It's required, right? So my verbiage to my staff is, hey, for your safety, when you're doing these screens, I want you to stand to the side so they're not breathing in your face. So that's a little something small, but I make sure I throw out there for your safety. My staff know that I care about whether or not they're being safe. Also wearing masks, you know, my staff know, hey, for your safety, where's your mask? I threw that out there, not, hey, where's your mask? Because if I say, hey, where's your mask? Then they're going to think, oh, another rule. And she caught me again. She's always looking for me to mess up. But when I say for your safety, it's so easy to say, hey, I'm worried about you. Where's your mask? You know, those are easy things to say in a way that your staff is going to be more receptive of it. And you're planting a seed. They should be worried about their own safety. You're also going to have staff that are overly worried about their safety and they're afraid to come back. And that's definitely a tricky situation because we don't want to push a staff member to do something that may put them in danger. So hear their concerns, listen to them, find out what they are, see how they can be addressed. Don't say in a meeting, hey, Sally is scared to come back because she's afraid of this, this, and this. Don't do that. That's kind of a no-brainer, but we got to mention it. But what you could say in a meeting is, hey, some people are concerned about this and this. What are y'all's thoughts on it? And just knowing and hearing that other staff may not be concerned about it, or other staff have come up with a plan or a way to work around it, might be very comforting to that one staff member. Hand washing, coughing, staying at home. Be prepared for the event that people may get sick. What is going to be your PTO policy? It may not be COVID, statistically not going to be COVID, but what if they have a stomach bug? What if they have the flu? Or what if they have a cold, allergies, things of that nature? What is going to be your policy on that? Are you going to want them to come in anyway? Would you have encouraged them before? Things of that nature we really need to be prepared for, because we don't want to have advantage taken in this situation. We don't want people to just say, hey, I'm not feeling well, and not have to come in. That might become a good Friday bad feeling and get a 3-day weekend. We don't want that. But we definitely don't want staff coming in with a fever. So be very clear with your staff about what your policy is going to be and how you're going to handle those situations. Are you going to require a note from a doctor? You have to keep in mind, some doctors aren't going to see them. If they have certain symptoms, they're not going to be allowed to come into the doctor's office. They're just going to see them via telehealth. How are you going to get a note in those cases? Telehealth services or teleservices, I heard in a meeting recently, has been around for over 20 years. And if our companies have not taken advantage of it or used it, now is a good time to find out how we can use it to our advantage. It's not going to go away. It is now in our society, in our system, and it's going to be used in the future. So you're always trying to find out if these are services that you can hold on to and continue to use and capitalize on. And then finally, I just want to make sure, if we look at the next slide, I just want to make sure that we're taking it slow. We need to keep things in mind. Like I said before, shared resources are going to go to the highest earner. And if your staff is not that highest earner, then you're going to have to be a little more patient with them or run the risk of losing them. Childcare, anxiety due to change. It's been nothing but change. Some people have anxiety, and not only do they have anxiety, but they're not comfortable telling you they have anxiety. Be aware of those. Anxiety can manifest in physical symptoms like stomach cramps, bathroom visits quite often, headaches, lots of headaches. If you have a staff complaining about those things, it may be linked to anxiety, and they may need a better plan. Not that they can't change, they can. And not that they need to be babied or anything of that nature. That's not true either. A lot of times with anxiety, they just need to see a plan laid out that they know is going to work. And they're going to know it's going to work because, remember, They're feeding off of you, and your optimism and your confidence is what's going to reduce their anxiety. New transportation or new family needs with children, with caring for parents that they wouldn't send to a home right now or couldn't. If they were in a facility and sent home, those are new needs that we need to consider. And some daycares are not even open yet. Some have closed down and are not going to reopen. They couldn't survive this time. So financially, so keep that in mind. They may have to find new childcare. And if there's a lot of people looking for new childcare, all the other childcare places are going to be full. So we need to make sure we're allowing time for that. Like I said before, I want to reiterate, buying in from staff is very important. You need to be able to identify who's going to drag their feet on this, who's going to slow the process down, who is the one that always has a negative yeah, but to every suggestion or offer. Know this in advance. They're the ones you want to identify. They're the ones you want to make the captains of the plans. And not officially. It's something they will feel once you start using their verbiage and take a tiny piece of their suggestion and incorporate it into yours. Needs of other families when returning to work. And one more time, I'll say it, the highest earners will get priority on those family resources. So keep that in mind as we're putting extra requirements onto our staff. They genuinely may need more time. Okay. And then our next slide, be your best. Your staff will need you to be the expert, the cheerleader, optimistic, knowledgeable, understanding, and kind. You can't be those things if you don't do all of those things for yourself first. That is so important. You're the best boss, you're the best leader when you're the best you. When you're not the best you, you're short, you're agitated easily, you're tired, you're all the things you don't want your staff to be. So take care of yourself first. And the beauty of taking care of yourself is that you're modeling to your team that they need to take care of themselves. Okay. Again, I am Deborah and I work with Centerstone, and we always want to reach out to the community, be there for you guys, give you the things that you need, support you guys, provide education and treatment. These are 3 numbers that you can reach us at. If any of your staff just want to talk at this time, if they're feeling stressed and they just want to get some things off their chest, we have our care line. It's free. They can call in and talk with someone. If anyone is needing outpatient care, our call center is the 2nd number. We can connect people to services for therapy or for medication, insured or uninsured. We accept all insurances, and we also have a sliding scale for uninsured population. That's one of my departments. They can get therapy services for some as low as $2 a piece. And then we have our addiction services and a residential treatment as well. So keep us in mind if you have any staff or anyone in the community that you think could benefit from our services. Okay.
All right, thank you, Deborah. That gave us a lot to think about and some great resources. I'll remind everybody, if you have any questions, please enter them in the bottom function, the Q&A function, and I'll help moderate those for Deborah. I do have some questions that have come up from members over time that I would like to address if that works. One of the ones was, as you go through these initial conversations and kind of transitioning back and what that looks like, what are your best practices or suggestions on gauging how that reentry is going over time, like to continue reassessing that?
I would, it's not very difficult. You can see Likert type scales online. You can Google them. They're 0 to 10. And I would find out what's important to you and your staff. If it is, I mentioned PTO, I mentioned connectedness or morale and productivity. Those are the 3 things I mentioned. If you're wanting the staff's opinions, you could easily pull up a Likert scale 0 to 10 and have staff rate it. Just say, hey, right now, how do you feel things are going? And have them rate each one. 0 being not so well, 10 being absolutely fabulous. Those are called Likert scales, Likert. You can create one in a Word document and you can put in what is important to your company. And then we do pre and post. I would do them periodically. Not every day, you don't want to burden them with that kind of stuff. But maybe bi-weekly, you could do some ratings and say, for example, if I were to poll my staff, I would ask them how they felt their happiness is with their company right now. And always make Likert scales anonymous and leave a blank at the bottom for any suggestions. That doesn't mean you're going to follow these suggestions, but when you have your next meeting, mention it. They know you're reading it. They know you're listening. So mention it. It could be something like in the meeting, hey, from the suggestions, we've got some really good ones and I appreciate that. One of the suggestions were that we start doing XYZ. What are your thoughts on that? Or one of the suggestions were that we do XYZ. And at this time, we can't do that, but I have my eye out for the future and see if it's possible. You know, just to mention it, they know they've got that. But Likert scales are usually pretty good and easily tailored.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. You covered this topic a little bit, but I wanted to reiterate it a little bit because I have gotten quite a few questions about this. So one of the concerns is as businesses are moving staff back into an office, physical location after being at home and perhaps somewhat isolated, there is concern that employees won't feel safe. And so you were talking about how you can recognize that, but can you give some ideas on how to have those individual conversations, like how to start that conversation and make sure that they, that you're understanding what they're going through, but kind of try to work through that? Because I think those are going to be a little bit difficult conversations to have.
They are, and those are individual conversations. One of the things I didn't mention, and I'm going to throw it out there first because I will forget, I know me that well, is be prepared as you're bringing staff back for a little more socialization than you wanted. There may be times they're in the hallway and they're gabbing away, and so just be prepared for that and kind of go with the flow on it. And then after a couple of days, you know your staff, it's time to say, okay, guys, I've missed you all too, but we need to get back to work. But be prepared for that. And then to address your question about the concerns, you can't address any concern unless you hear it. And that's the important thing. And they need to know that you heard it. A lot of times there's invalid concerns, but statistically invalid, but they're valid because they're felt. So when you're having these conversations with the staff, if I had, and I hope there's no one on this call, Nancy, say I had somebody named Nancy, and Nancy worries all the time, and I already know coming in she's going to have 100 excuses to why she needs to delay and things of that nature, but I have pressure to get her in. If that's the case, I'm going to have a one-on-one with Nancy, and I'm going to say, hey, Nancy, I know you tend to think things through a lot, and I want to know what you're thinking and what your concerns are and see if I can address these before we even get started. That's how I would handle Nancy. Now, I wouldn't respond to any of her concerns as, that is ridiculous, because it may be ridiculous, but I wouldn't respond that way. I would go, wow, okay, I wonder if anybody else has had these concerns. Let's do some research on this and let's see how, if we're worrying for no reason, let's do that. So now you've aligned with Nancy and you're using verbiage like, let us look. We are worrying for no reason. Things of that nature. You want to take you completely out of it, because as you are modeling to her that you feel better about her concerns, remember it's a we. So she will start feeling better about her concerns. If you say you'll end that conversation with, I feel good, you don't. But if you go with we and us, and I of we feel better, then she's coming in too. Does that make sense? Okay.
It does. Thank you. Another question that has been raised, and you kind of just talked about it a little bit, is are there good ways to encourage other employees to support each other? That's not necessarily on them, but of course as a team, they hear different things that you hear, and so how can you go about having that conversation, not to put it on them, but to maybe set the expectation that it's okay to do that and it's encouraged?
It's encouraged. I can tell you here, one of the things that I have loved is that our CEO, our big guy, has done coffee and a Zoom. And it's just a time where anybody that wants, and he made several times available, anybody that wants can log on, have coffee with him, and just talk about whatever concerns there are. Creating that time is very important. If it's a 15-minute in midday, you could call it whatever you want. You could call it chat with your coworker or anything of that nature, and allow that time for them to do that. And verbalize, this is really important, verbalize what you want them to do. You want them to support one another, right? Not required, but if you feel like coming in, conversing, supporting one another, the conference room is big enough to hold 10 people safely, with distance. So just saying that, hey, today at noon, if anybody wants to talk, there's room enough, just keep your social distance and make sure that you're wearing your masks and be safe. That way, people aren't required to go in there to be the support system, but some people really enjoy being a support system, and they're open to do that.
That's great, thank you. We just got a question in the Q&A. I'm going to rephrase it maybe a little bit. How long, so this might be a little bit of a technical question, but I think you can address it from the human aspect.
Okay.
How long do we need to think about COVID sickness and paid time off surrounding that, and the allowances going with that, or do we even have an answer on how long that time frame should be? So I think it's kind of a little bit two-part. There are going to be some government guidelines around it and how long that PTO lasts. But in terms of the human part of that, and in the mental health as we work through this whole cycle of COVID, what should we be expecting over time?
So from my limited knowledge of the technical part, we are being told that the second round is going to happen and we need to be prepared for it. That's one of the reasons that I say let's move slowly, and that we're always prepared to revert back if necessary. That we've not been given a timeline on when that is going to happen, but that it could. So to say we're done making provisions for COVID right now, or that we can foresee when we're done, we can't do that. We just can't, because we've not even had the second round. I believe China started their second round already. So the human aspect is COVID is going to be a conversation for the next 10 years. It just is. You're going to hear people say, and I think this is awesome, you're going to hear people say, oh, remember back when we had to wear masks to work? And then there's going to be an intern or a new hire that's going to go, whoa, really? That day will come. But COVID will always be a conversation. As far as needing time for using PTO and having an excuse to have lower productivity or accommodations, as far as that goes, the human side of it is, it will move from needing accommodations for COVID to needing accommodations for anxiety related to COVID. That will happen. That's already happening. And at some point, each manager, each boss, each employer is going to have to step aside and go, okay, the threat isn't real, but the perception of a threat is real. And that's when you're very honest with your staff about that. You pull Nancy aside and you say, hey, Nancy, I need your help. Let's look at whether we're concerned about something that's legitimately going to affect us right now. And let's see if we need to continue making provisions. That may happen. It's already happening now, because you have some people that are like, oh, I'm not going to the store, even with the mask, even with the gloves. I'm not doing this. I've even heard I'm not ordering from Uber Eats because the food could be contaminated. So if you're not going to the store, you're not ordering from Uber, and you're not, what are you going to do? You have to eat. So when you start to see that type of stuff in your employees in regards to work, I can't work from home because of XYZ, but I can't come in because of XYZ, but we're not working from home anymore because of XYZ. That's more of a perception of danger than it is true danger. And it's important to honor their perception, because even if it's not real, it's very real to them. And so we need to honor it, and we need to watch out for it, and we need to address it head on, and call out the elephant in the room, and just say the things that people are afraid to say.
Wonderful, thank you. I don't see any more Q&As, and I think we're kind of approaching our 11:45 ending time. So you've given us a lot of information about being intentional in our communication right now, and I think that that's something that we all should think about for quite some time. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Centerstone for supporting this wonderful series, and to our sponsor, All Trust Insurance. We couldn't do these kinds of things without the partnerships that we have in the community, and we appreciate all of them.